Good morning, Commission members. I'm assuming you can all hear me. Thank you for once again working with us on this virtual meeting. It is certainly our hope to be able to bring us all together face to face as soon as possible. This meeting is being recorded, is being run live, and will be archived and put on the BC Transit website for members of the public who wish to look at it later, but they are able at this point to follow our proceedings. So with that, before we begin, I do want to acknowledge the Victoria Regional Transit Commission conducts its business on the Lekwungen traditional territory homelands of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. I'll call our meeting to order and ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Lisa helps.
I have a seconder?
Second, Dubo.
Okay. I'm going to call the question on that. All in favor?
Fred Haynes in favour.
Anyone opposed? Shall we say we'll go with those opposed only? Also, to make life smooth for us, because the first two out of the gate were Mayor Helps and Councillor Dubrow, could I prevail upon the two of you to be our mover and seconder for these motions to get our discussions going? And I think that will run things smoothly. If we come to something which you have some reason not to wish to be associated with, then obviously makes sense for you to declare that. But otherwise, I'm going to just ask both you, Lisa and Shamarki, if you'll get us launched on each of these. So the first item for our business this morning is the approval of the minutes from June the 16th. I'll take it that Mayor Helps moves it and Councillor Dubrow seconds it. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, if you're in opposition, please indicate. I'll assume then the motion passes. For the chair's remarks, I do have a couple of things I would like to focus on. On July the 20th, BC Transit, as you know, launched a province-wide marketing campaign focusing on safety and encouraging the use of face coverings on board buses in transit systems across BC. The goal of the campaign was to influence the behaviors of transit passengers and to create a feeling of, you know, we're all in this together, to help foster considerate and cooperative rider etiquette, and also, of course, to increase our ridership. I was led to participate in the BC Transit team handing out branded face masks at transit shelters across the region. Safety has always been a priority for BC Transit, as you know, and starting on August the 24th, the use of face masks will be mandatory while taking transit in BC. We want to, as a commission, I know, publicly thank our drivers and our customers as we ride together through what has been a challenging time for many. And obviously, we want to signal that we expect and appreciate full cooperation on this mandatory requirement for mask wearing. Also, another thing to just bring to your attention, and it will fold out into many of the items that we're going to be hearing about this morning. COVID-19 has caused financial challenges for many, and transit, as we will see today, has been impacted. We've known this. Our last meeting we acknowledged it, but now we're starting to see the financials that show us exactly the impact. It is still too early to resolve all the issues that may present, as we hope to see ridership and revenue increase in coming months, and joint funding through Canada's Safe Restart Agreement may provide some relief. I don't know if you all saw, I saw this morning, the Times columnist, where the announcement was made that BC Ferries, to get money from that fund. I think at one time that may have been in question. Obviously, the province has been negotiating, and that is good news that the ferries have been given funding. I suspect, because I know the work that is going on with our own staff and at the political level, to highlight the need for both TransLink and BC Transit to get funding from that Canada State, and the feds identified that transit was a priority. Personally, now that this announcement on ferries has come out, I'm hoping that we will soon hear something positive for transit, but let's stay tuned for that. You will see on your agenda, and actually it's the first report, and you may want to get any further clarification from Lisa Trotter when that comes up, that we're recommending a separate other additional meeting in September for the Commission, so that by then, hopefully, we might have some more details on how our service is unfolding, how our revenue from that is impacting our bottom line, and hopefully some good news from the province. So when we come to that item, if you have any further questions, you can ask Lisa, although I can assure you that at this point, if we had specific details, it would have been passed on to this Commission immediately. So with those remarks, we'll move to reports, and the first one there is the 2021 VRTC meeting schedule, and we need to approve this schedule. To start the discussion, I'm going to assume that Mayor Helps and Councillor DeGros have moved and seconded this, and so it is on the floor. And I'm going to first of all turn to Lisa Trotter and ask her if she has anything to add to this.
Thank you, Chair Bryce. Nothing further to add other than to this point, the schedule being very much in line with what we've done annually in terms of meeting the needs for BC Transit's decision-making throughout the next year in 2021. We've laid out the Commission meetings fairly much as usual on Tuesdays to take care of the regular business needed to be made by the Commission in terms of decision-making. And as Chair Bryce spoke to in her remarks, we have added for this year an extra meeting on September 29th to hopefully get some more clarity around performance indicators for ridership and transit, some revenue recovery. Hopefully we'll see an update there. It's been early days to see where ridership and revenue is going to sit at, and also to have a further discussion around any funding opportunities that may alleviate some of the issues we have around the finances today. And then we already had a meeting scheduled for November 3rd of this year. So looking for approval on the added September 29th day and approval on next year's calendar schedule.
Any members of the Commission have or comments on this schedule?
Yes, Susan, it's Lisa. I do.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I think we need to make an amendment to the August 10th, 2021 meeting, because later in this meeting, we're being asked to approve a 10-year vision that says we're going to review it annually. And I didn't see an annual review of the 10-year vision or the key performance indicators anywhere in 2021. So I think the logical time would be to add that to the August 10th, 2021 meeting in terms of either for information or for approval, but just so that new document we're being asked to approve later doesn't get lost.
Perfect. We'll add that in the appropriate column. In fact, I think the column that would be appropriate would be in the for approval column. And so Lisa Trotter's made a note of that. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, I'll call the question. Those who are opposed? Seeing none opposed, I will take that as the motion has passed. So moving along to reports from various members of staff who are not here with me, but are on the line with us. And we can go to number 5, operations update. And this is going to be for information. I will ask Kevin if he will lead us through this, please.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'll keep this brief. We've had a very good period from a service reliability standpoint since we last spoke. In fact, we've reached a target of 99.9%, which is actually outstanding. There's obviously many things that have led to this. We've got lower traffic on the road, lower service levels, but at the same time, the environment's posed some challenges that this is something that we can all be very happy with. We've utilized this time period to really use it as an opportunity to refine our processes in preparation for what we see as a bit of an uncertain fall. So we've got a lot of flexible service that allows us to respond to how different sectors open up, particularly educational institutions, and where demand would flow. So that's something that's been very key for us right now, is to take advantage of this opportunity. As you know, we did implement front door loading and fare collection very successfully. We've had little to no issues with that introduction. We are just now making sort of the final plans for our fall service. Going into the custom transit service world, you can see in the report that ridership continues to be lower than year over year. Not a surprise, but there is certainly in the recent months, particularly a significant increase that suggests that ridership is slowly coming back. It's doubled since the first month of the pandemic. Couple items of note, customer service info. Our complaints have stayed relatively static year over year, but what was interesting is in the recent month, just seeing an increase in complaints largely related to COVID-related items, perception of full buses, people not wearing masks, perception of cleanliness, scheduling info. So those are some of the things that have brought the numbers in June year over year higher. And not a surprise, but schedule adherence complaints have gone significantly down. Nothing else specific of trending other than we're working hard in preparation just for what fall's going to look like. I think that's with most agencies, the uncertain world that we're preparing for. So I'm happy to address any questions if I haven't covered anything you would like to hear.
Thank you for that, Kevin. I'm going to suggest that we'll have the motion on the floor, and it's moved by Helps and it's seconded by Dubrow. And now, questions or discussion? Any members of the commission want to get clarification from Kevin or add a comment?
Sorry, it's Rob. May I?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, hi, Rob. Morning.
Morning. I know we're making masks mandatory now. What can we just go through the steps of confrontation with that? What do we do with people who don't have a mask or refuse to put one on? What are the drivers doing?
Yeah, good question. Sorry, I apologize in advance. Sure enough, 4 minutes after this meeting started, construction started next door in the room. So hopefully you can still hear me okay. That's a very good question, and it was something I've been monitoring very closely with agencies who've gone that direction across Canada. They've all practiced the same philosophy of it's mandatory, but it's not being enforced. Most of that comes with the philosophy that people generally want to follow the rule, but when it becomes choice, there's less uptake. And we know in the transit industry, it's critical for our success to relax capacity that there's more people wearing masks. And that's where the policy of it being mandatory comes in, and we're in virtually all systems that have practiced that, it's been more than 90% compliance. We currently are at approximately 50% of users wearing masks today, so we feel that will be the next step to bringing it to those heights that we need to be successful. When it comes to enforcement, The most simple reason for not doing is it's not within our purview to judge who should or shouldn't be wearing a mask through medical reasons. We know it's a very small percentage who do have legitimate medical reasons, but at the same time, we also know that the confrontation that can come from it leads to greater risk than just using this as more of an educational philosophy. And so we're going with that as the first step, and we'll certainly judge whether we need to take a different step. In every agency that's done it, I can assure you that the usage has gone up significantly to no less than 85%, but on average to low 90s.
If I may, through the chair, just a quick follow-up.
Absolutely.
So what are we saying then to individuals who are wearing a mask, who believe it's mandatory, and then go to the bus driver and complain that somebody is not wearing a mask on the bus?
Yes, and through the chair, the response would simply be it's not within their right to judge who should or shouldn't be.
Okay, so sorry, and maybe just as a clarification for my own self, I was under the impression that we had messaged out that that was a requirement now for ridership. Am I incorrect on that? Like, what maybe?
Highly suggested before it became the new mandatory, but it is murky, right?
If I may, through the chair, riveting noise in the background. Yeah, so today it's strongly recommended. As of August 24th, it's mandatory, and it's not unlike any federal transportation agency who's had to have it mandatory from the beginning. BC Ferries, for example, it's mandatory, but it's not enforced.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is Sharmarke.
Yes, go ahead, Margie.
I like this approach that it's not forcefully enforced, and has one for the safety for the drivers. Second, sometimes people do rush from their houses and they might forget their masks. So there is certain cases that where you are late for work, and perhaps because of not well prepared, you might have forgotten your mask, and there could be more reasons why someone might not wear a mask. So I appreciate this approach, not forcefully forcing. But would there be a report back to the commission to see how well it's working, so that we can have second time to discuss?
Kevin?
Yeah, through the chair, we do track the compliance to this on a weekly basis. When we first started tracking about a month ago, we were at about 25%. Today, we're at about 50%. We'll continue to do so to see the success of this next step. So we would absolutely be able to report back.
And when is our next meeting in September?
It is
It's the September 29th.
September 29th.
Would it then, for the staff, do you think in September 29, is it a good time to know, because we are implementing in August 23rd, I don't get the date correct. So do you think within a month it would make sense to report back on that meeting?
I think it would be. We'll make sure that that information, along with, because obviously the ridership hopefully will be impacted positively if the mask wearing is, and so that'll all be part of that report on how we're doing. But we'll definitely add on their compliance to the mask coverings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? I guess I would ask Kevin, what is the plan between now and the 24th to really jack up awareness? I think there's kind of a general idea out there, but that the intensity of the need to be in compliance by the 24th. Is there a plan for upping that public awareness?
Kevin, did you want me to take this one?
Yeah, sure, Christy.
Okay. Yeah, just from a marketing and communications perspective, we will be changing our messaging over the next few weeks to kind of provide a stronger language. All of the signage at the bus stops will be changed out. Right now, it says "Please wear face covering." The language in that signage at stops, on board, and in all of our digital platforms will get a little bit stronger to articulate that it's now a mandatory requirement. We've had a really successful etiquette campaign that's been running for the last few weeks, and we can update some of that again to reflect the mandatory use of face coverings versus just it being something that's strongly recommended. And we also had a good promotion a couple of weeks ago where we handed out a lot of face coverings, a lot of masks. That went over really, really well. We plan to do that again just shortly after the mandatory face ruling goes into effect. So we'll be able to get more masks out into the community and use that as an opportunity to spread the message as well.
Thanks, Christy. Any other questions or comments on item number 5 before I call it?
It's Kevin Murdoch here.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Sure, through your chair. Just curious, the number of people that will be allowed on the buses. Will we be back at full capacity with masks allowed, or does this still limit us to say 2/3 capacity on our buses? What does this mean in terms of our capacity?
Kevin?
Yes, thank you. Good question. So that was part of our recovery plan that was released, that we would increase capacity in stages. Currently, we're at an approximately equivalent to a seated load, but this would enable, so that the higher uptake we have of mask usage is what enables us to increase the capacity on the bus and get us to a more sustainable, as passengers return to the system. That's critical to our success.
So just for my clarification, is this 100% capacity allowance with masks? Or
not at this time.
Okay.
That answer your questions then, Kevin?
I think that does. I guess there's no sort of percentage number available at this point. It's just it's a sliding scale as things go forward. It'll be adapted, as I'm sort of hearing between the lines on that one. So that's fine with me.
If I may, through the chair, just to provide some further clarity, our next step would be to get towards 2/3 capacity, followed by full capacity. So those are the stages, and it's the uptake by riders that are critical to us opening that capacity.
Right. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much, Kevin.
And that would be another piece of information that would be valuable for the commission to have in September. Kevin, if you could provide that for us in September, that would be very interesting.
Chair, if I could ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Jeff here.
Yeah. Hi, Jeff. Yes.
Yeah. So just maybe a suggestion on getting back to the no enforcement, but changing the messaging to be a little stronger. Just perhaps give some consideration to the issue that has been raised by Rob as far as enforcement. I think we just need to be careful we don't up the dialogue around the mandatory part, but not address those that are very hypersensitive to that wonder how we are going to enforce. So I understand that we could be careful not to say, oh, by the way, it won't be enforced, because that's a counterproductive message. But I think something along the lines of please be aware that we will not be able to enforce actively in all the locations at every time. And so we just encourage people to, and I don't know how many people will be really sensitive to it, but we know there'll be some. And my point is that at least if we identify it in some way that acknowledges that that we understand it won't be perfect, and also somehow acknowledges the fact that we're not going to have enforcement people on every bus. So that's just a comment there, and staff can deal with that however they like. Thanks.
Kevin, you indicated before that you were monitoring what's happened elsewhere. I believe masks have been mandatory in Toronto for the last few weeks.
Yeah, thank you. It is become increasingly common that it's mandatory. In virtually all cases, it's been directed either at the provincial level or the municipal level, not at an individual transit agency level. That part is unique for us, but it's more common, and that's where I can say with confidence what other systems have observed, and that is a significant increase from what was typically in the 20% range of mask usage to when it's gone mandatory. In public spaces, including transit, it's gone right up to 90% very quickly. And that's what we would anticipate here and what our hope would be. But yes, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and then Toronto as a municipality, Calgary as a municipality at a minimum.
I think what Mayor Orr is alerting us to is we don't want to set up a situation where we have customers monitoring each other or taking any kind of action if there is someone on the bus who does not have a mask. And so I guess what he is signaling to us is that the public needs to know all the information so that they know what the whole package is.
And through the chair, I'll just add to that in that we are very sensitive to exactly that. We want to absolutely ensure the safety of everyone who is on board our buses. And so, you know, we will update our website and make sure that all of that information is available to the public. We also have multiple interviews with media outlets where we can use those as opportunities to get the messaging out. And we do continue to articulate that this is, although it is a mandatory step, it's a step for mandatory, it's largely around education. That is what our main goal is, and that we're looking for compliance, and we're not going to be discriminating against individuals who are getting onto our buses.
Thank you. Any further comments?
This is Shermarke. I'm wondering, did the province supported with masks those who cannot afford? Has there been any discussion regarding that?
Kevin?
I'm sorry, I've not been privy to any conversation related to that specifically. We did have masks available for handing out to customers as part of promotion, but not specifically to your question.
Further comments or questions?
With their decision marker again, do we have any budget for the future and to have some that those who are unable to have a mask that they can come and is there any opportunity that we can explore?
Kevin or Christy, have you any experience with other systems who have gone through this on this issue of affordability?
Through the chair, I believe in Ontario, the TTC was provided with masks through the province, and they ultimately were oversupplied. So they didn't find themselves giving out nearly as many as they anticipated. At this point, we haven't made plans to look at providing masks on board, but we are, like I said, we're going to be providing another promotional opportunity that we'll try to get out there and into the community to hand out quite a few additional masks come September as well.
Thank you. We must also remember that transit is just one part of their day, and as transit is now requiring masks, more and more of the activities that people are involved in, if they can't social distance, will require that they have masks. So it should not come as unusual that they have to all of a sudden come up with a mask on transit. But another thing to monitor for us, please.
And through the chair, Susan, might I add that we are not expecting that individuals come on board with a specific mask. It's a face covering. So, you know, there are opportunities. You can wear a scarf, things like that. Also help to mitigate the challenges of being socially distanced.
Maybe,
Chair.
maybe this is Sharmak, just to continue my last point. Maybe in the advertisement and the communication, could we include some way that showing that people, they can make their own masks at home and they can also wear that, so it's clear that they are allowed to do that?
Through the chair, absolutely. In fact, I have a feeling we might have even gotten some of that information out in the earlier days, that there are ways to very easily make your own face coverings at home, but absolutely we can take that back to the marketing and communications teams.
Thank you. Mayor Murdoch.
Oh, thank you. Just curiosity. I know a number of businesses have moved to making masks available for purchase as well. I mean, I can certainly see envision where people running for the bus forget their mask, would prefer to have one, but you know, is it possible to provide masks, say, you know, for $2 or $5, something like that, as they get on board, if people forget one and want to purchase a mask on board, just as an option? I know. I just foresee a lot of people wanting to comply, but, you know, just for absent-minded reasons or leaving something behind might not be able to. So just providing that option for people might be not necessarily giving them away, but providing them as a service. Just an idea.
Staff, have you got any, undoubtedly these thoughts have crossed your minds in your discussions. What would the response be to that?
Thank you, through the chair. I think we could look at the opportunity. Whether the purchase is on board is something that I could see posing us some challenges, but I don't want to rule out a good idea, and there might be some other means, or that could be part of a solution. So I think I could work with marketing to look at, first of all, the availability, and then we could think about the logistics of distribution.
Thank you. Any further comments?
This is Sharmarke. I really like the idea, and it's an excellent idea. Also, how about if someone can afford and they don't have a mask? Then that goes back to my question: would there be opportunity that they will be offered if we are thinking in that way?
I think, yeah, we canvassed that idea just a few minutes ago about distributing at no charge. I think it would get to be very dodgy for the operator to have to determine who could and couldn't afford. If you went down that path of selling masks, then to have to make that sort of point of purchase decision that a person didn't have to pay, I think could pose problems. But staff, you've heard the comments here. I think generally what we're saying as a commission, we're totally behind this. We want the highest compliance possible, but in a fairness and reasonable fashion. So, and I know that's the framework you're already working in. Any further comments? I'll call the question then on information on that item number 5. Those who are opposed. Hearing none opposed, we'll assume that that motion passes. Now, Megan is on deck with number 6, the Q1 financial performance information. And this, at this point, is just for our information to help get our heads in gear for what we're facing. So, Megan?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Tina, you're in control of the deck there. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm just going to highlight a couple notes here, and then I'll touch on some key points, and then leave it open for discussion afterwards. But as it's been pointed out already, for this forecast, it's very conservative, to say the least. There's so many items that we don't know the answers to yet. So I naturally have a conservative nature, so the forecasts on the revenue sides are very conservative, and particularly the gas tax revenue. I'll touch on that, and I just wanted to highlight that we're predicting it will be down 40%, but a 10% change in that assumption can make a big impact. And also just the price of fuel is always an unknown, and that can have a big impact as well. And throughout the presentation, there are COVID-related expenses that are impacting the forecast, and they're in there because I don't know at this time what the mechanism or the amount, and fingers crossed, of government funding we'll get to help offset that. So just bear in mind, this is an incredibly conservative forecast, and yeah, ask questions as we go along. Can you go to slide? I'll skip this one to the summary and go to slide. Thank you. Yeah, so of course,
excuse me, Megan, just a second. Yes. Commission members, as we go through, Megan, if they have questions as they go through the slides, would you be prepared to respond at that point?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if anybody has a question as we go through, just please indicate.
Yeah, I'll pause at each slide and
yeah, perfect.
Sure. And of course, this one is the big one that we've been talking about, and it's related to the level of service and number of passengers, and the outcome is the passenger revenues. And of course, for April and May, we did not collect fares and started collecting fares June 1st. So you'll see that we are down 70% for the first quarter. And we are forecasting to reach an average target of around 55% passenger revenue for year end. Hopefully we'll do better than that. The big unknowns, of course, is UPass revenues. We did get confirmation we'll receive our full BC Bus Pass revenue. And so that forecast is a combination of very conservative on UPass, cash, but getting all of our BC Bus Pass revenue. And advertising revenue, we're doing fine. We're on budget and forecasted to be so. Can you go back up a teeny bit, Tina? Yeah. And the passenger trips, it's the same story. For the month of April, we were at 25%, May at 35%. I think in June, we were hitting around 45% of prior year. And the forecast is the remainder of the year being around 55%. Now, of course, we're targeting the 70% and maybe a full capacity. I'm not sure if that'll happen by year end. So my numbers are conservative on that. Any questions?
Can we just stay back on that, Tina,
yep.
please? Mayor Haynes, did you have a comment on that? I saw you come up on the screen there. Mayor Haynes? Did you have a question? I'm thinking, any other commission members, any questions on this revenue and passenger trips page?
It's Kevin Murdoch here.
Yeah.
Just a question to you, Chair, on this one. The passenger trip forecast, I'm just curious about the 55%. If that's similarly conservative, or I mean, it's got to be an almost impossible number to predict in many ways because you don't really know what's going to happen. But how much of an influencer is that on our risk over the course of this year? If that drops to say 45%, it goes up to 65%. What does it look like in terms of numbers?
Well, sorry to the chair, that your average fare is roughly $1.50, so that's a direct impact on your passenger revenues. So I don't have the exact number per percentage point, but.
So just for my clarification, though, at some point the operational volume would scale up as well, though, correct? And so does it automatically add net revenue, or does it sort of cancel out with increased operational costs?
It would definitely benefit revenue with the increased capacity. So I think we're all hopeful that will happen, but my forecast is conservative relative to that, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments on this slide? If not, we'll go to the next one. Thanks, Megan.
Okay. Tina? Sure, just stop there for a moment. And just a reminder that as of April 1st, we drew down the entire operating reserves, and we no longer charge budget, and the local the commission and the province both pay their typical cost sharing on operating expenses. So you now see a variance on provincial operating contribution, which is a reflection of lower operating costs. The second big ticket item there is the fuel tax revenue. They are currently, the Ministry of Finance is where we receive that funding from, and they are the ones that reconcile the fuel retailers, et cetera, and they are giving us an advance until the end of September, and they will do a reconciliation in October. So that's why year to date things look fine. But the forecast, we have chosen, again, a very conservative outlook that we may drop down to 40% of fuel volumes compared to last year. So I'm hopeful that won't be the case, because that can make a significant difference to our financial position. And I think at the beginning of the presentation, a 10% change in that assumption is almost $2 million that goes straight to the commission in terms of revenue. But I won't know until October. And the last piece, of course, is the local contribution, which is a reflection of operating expenses and passenger revenues, lease fees, et cetera. And the variance is a direct reflection primarily on the reduced passenger revenues and fuel tax.
So when you have there that 19.4 million over budget, can you
Correct. That's
make comments on that?
yeah, that is the 22 million on passenger revenues it needs to be covered by the commission, basically, because you've lost a funding source. And you do gain a little bit back from lower operating costs, your share of the operating costs. And then you, the lease fees are also have been lowered from the forecast, which helps reduce the local contribution share. But the local contribution share is forecasted to be over budget, primarily on passenger revenues of 22 million and a fuel tax revenue of 7.8 million.
So what you're saying to us, and we see in the documentation that we prepared, is that as things roll out to the end of our financial year, the risk at this point is identified at 19.4 million estimated.
Correct.
And subject to other sources of funding coming.
Correct.
Susan, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
When the package, the ask was put together by BC Transit and TransLink to the federal government, were these exact or close to numbers provided for transit systems across British Columbia? So would the federal government be aware that in our region, the share, the deficit is to local governments is 19.4 million, or projected deficit? And so too, obviously, with others across the province. Just wondering how these numbers were used by BC Transit in making the case to the federal government for the amount of funding that was ultimately received.
Well, through the chair, we are in ongoing discussions both with the Ministry of Transportation and the Ministry of Finance regarding this specifically, and we are pulling together a lot of information for them to make that case. And I'm not sure if it's a case to the federal government, but a case for how the process for helping individual local governments offset their revenue losses and COVID expenses. But at this stage, I don't know the mechanism nor the amounts, so they are not reflected in these financial statements. And Christy, I don't know if you want to chime in on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just echo Megan in that what we're doing right now is just working closely with the province to determine how the federal dollars and potential provincial dollars would be administered throughout the various transit agencies across the province, including TransLink. But we are providing ongoing forecasting information that would reflect the situation that the commission is facing at year end.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I think that we're anticipating that within 30 to 60 days we're going to have a whole lot more information that we're hoping we'll be able to share with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, and I think that sort of focusing on the question that Lisa helps ask, your phrase ongoing forecasting means that it wasn't a point in time when we said, help, we need funding from the federal government. This is fluid and being updated as you're going along?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, this is Sharmarke. And is there any recovery plan from the federal government, or?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Is there any recovery plan for transit? And has there been any difference between the emergency funding that and the province asked, or is there any further funding coming from the federal government regarding recovery to transit?
Maybe just, Christy, if you could take and give us the 30-second on what the funding that the federal government has and what its relationship is with the province and how that would impact on us.
Yeah, through the chair, and my apologies, I don't have exact numbers, but my understanding is that the federal government has identified specific funding for municipal relief, and within that package is specific funding to assist transit agencies. The second layer of that is that the provincial government would be looking at matching a lot of those shares, and so there is a discussion that is occurring as we speak right now in terms of how that package of funding would be divvied up amongst the various players. The province is working with us in collaboration with the other transportation agencies and doing this from a very holistic perspective. But without a doubt, transit has been very specifically identified as requiring assistance. And so that funding package from the federal government is available, and we're just working through how it's going to be administered and what the specific funding packages per community will look like. So again, it is fluid. We don't have all the answers, but I can assure you that we are working very diligently in trying to represent all of our transit agency needs in these discussions going forward.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments on this slide?
It's Rob.
Oh, Rob, I've got Kevin's photo there.
Oh,
This is it.
He's channeling Rob.
I unmuted, which is probably why I popped up, but let Rob go first.
Okay, Rob, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just two quick questions. And this is, again, for me, so that I have an understanding of BC Transit as an organization. How does it operate from a financial standpoint in regards to being able to run deficits and moving those deficits into long-term debt? Is BC Transit similar to municipalities where we're supposed to theoretically build a balanced budget every year, or are we allowed to run a deficit? Is there any legislation being put in place to allow us to run a deficit, operational deficit this year? And then
Megan? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Rob.
And I'll just roll this one final thing into it. Is our liquidity is if I know there'll be funding in place, and I know staff are working diligently to have to make up the shortfalls, but theoretically, if we were not to be able to get any more money from the provincial or federal government, how long does BC Transit and the Victoria have from a liquidity standpoint and be able to continue to operate?
Megan?
Well, I could probably speak to the commission as a whole. We have a couple funding levers, and of course it's passenger revenues, fuel tax revenue, and property taxes, and we've already set property taxes. under legislation, we're not allowed, the commission's not allowed to run a deficit in terms of the transit fund, cannot drop below zero. And because you're not actually a municipality, but you're a commission, you're not necessarily allowed to go out and borrow and have a deficit, et cetera. So it's a little awkward compared to a municipality. BC Transit, we do have the right to do for long-term borrowing. We can't run a deficit on an annual basis. So how long? Really, if we did not get any funding, the commission did not get any additional funding, we would probably be our transit fund would go to zero, and then we'd be relying on property taxes as it stands right now for next year.
So just through the chair, just one follow-up question then. Sorry, could you just answer the question around, do we have the ability to take our short-term deficit that we're going to incur this year and roll it into long-term debt? Has that been suggested by the province or by the federal government, or would there be any ability to do that, or do we need to find some funding sources for this year?
I don't believe that we are able to do that. And we've had many discussions with the ministry and the options that the commission, as it's structured under legislation, that it has, and it appears at this time to be very limited, but we're still talking to them about potential options. So I can't answer all those questions right now, but it is a hot topic that I've had discussions with the ministry on, because the commission is unique in that way. So we can follow up more on maybe our September about any other potential options that we have that aren't obvious to us right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Kevin Murdoch, you were coming on.
I did. I guess one comment to start is, boy, the province couldn't have timed their clawing back of our operational reserves at any worst possible time, where we really absolutely need to have some operational reserves. We have nothing available to us to manage that. I think that was the intention all along, was to have some of this flexibility, given our inflexibility of our model. I also recognize that the shift here really, with the province operating piece being put onto the operational costs, not onto the overall net result of dropping things, that puts all of the risk onto the municipalities. And we have zero flexibility in our taxation. We can't run deficits either. We can't change our taxation quickly because it's based on property taxes. It's a really bizarre model. It gets really exposed at times like this, that it's inappropriate, frankly, to have such an inflexible model with such inflexible funders simultaneously. It makes us inflexible. And I think the reality here is that if we don't get the provincial and the federal funding to cover this, this body is going to have to take some very hard looks at what we do in terms of cutting back services quite dramatically in the fall for next year, because we have no other options here, really, unless we want to start looking at massive tax increases for this one item, where many of us, most of the municipalities are already facing substantial costs outside of this. So I think, I guess I would just ask that in that discussion with the province and the feds, they understand that this is by the structure they've set up, this inflexibility, we're really in a hard place here. And the reality is that the transit could get really damaged by force if they can't step in and be the flexible option here to fund this, because there's really no other options here facing us. That number, that $20 million number, is incredibly scary from a perspective of trying to find that in property taxes at a time when businesses are struggling and homeowners are struggling and everything else is happening. It's a really tough one. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what comes out of the federal and the provincial government. But it's got to be quick too, because we're going to have to make some decisions here in the short term, and some pretty hard ones. So I guess that would be really more of a comment than a question. But I really appreciate the work that's gone on from staff to put this together in a comprehensible fashion that lays it out so bleakly, but also so clearly to all of us, and I think to the public as well, so we understand what we're facing here going forward. And hopefully the province and the federal governments get the message from this clarity as well. So thank you for that.
Thanks for your comments, and you can see now why this is a projection with a number of sort of things that can happen in the interim, and why we do need to have that September meeting, so that the decisions that at least are in our court, we're as well equipped to make wise decisions at that time for the sake of our system. Any further comments on this slide?
Just
That
for
Megan
myself.
will- Oh,
Hi, it's Maya here. Can you hear me?
yeah, hi Maya. Yeah,
Hi,
go ahead.
sorry, new headset here. I just wanted to add in that both the FCM and the UBCM have been advocating for months on transit being part of the economic recovery. So there has been, we've heard now about the 19 billion that it's been announced from the federal government to flow to provinces and territories, and our province has already committed $1 billion of part of their contribution. So they're well aware of transit being an essential component of the economic recovery. So there's been a lot of advocacy that has been happening already. UBCM is working with the Ministry of Transportation. It's a bit different in BC because TransLink falls under the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and BC Transit falls under the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure. But both are well aware of the problem statement, and certainly all the mayors that have been on the call with Minister Robinson, hearing it over again. So I think it's where right now they're looking at how this will all play out. So in some ways, I feel comforted that they're aware of the challenges. They know the structure that the commission has, that local governments have. And I think just as they start to, now, how are they rolling this out? It's something that we follow closely and then we advocate accordingly. But our two other, sort of an advantage of the membership that municipalities have with both FCM and UBCM, the problem statement, transit was one of the early ones that came out. And then on behalf of UBCM, I convened a panel with all mayors of BC just to get further information so that it can be part of our platform that went forward to the ministry. So I think there's definitely more to come. It's all in the works now, but they're well aware of the challenge there and how we need to continually expand and grow transit. We can't do that with
Thank you, Maya, for that FCM and UBCM perspective. Totally agree. I think all the players know the challenge, and now it's a matter of us with our staff who are working consistently on a day-to-day basis with the province to identify just exactly what dollars of relief could be flow to the transit system. And as I said earlier, I take it as a positive sign that the announcement for ferries this morning was made. It sounds like methodically they are going through a process provincially, and hopefully we'll have some news soon. Any further comments on this slide? If not, then Megan?
Sure, I'll be quick-ish on the other slides. We've talked so much about the main components, but year to date on our operations side, we are under budget, $1.6 million. Most of it's due to lower service hours, although it does get offset by some overtime we incurred. We do have higher insurance costs this year, and of course there's the COVID related expenses, or PP&E, and the cleaning costs associated with that. And fuel has been well below budget, thankfully, this year compared to budget. And we are predicting it'll be below budget for year end. On the service hour side, we are below budget year to date, and we've talked about that before with Kevin's presentation. And we are forecasting to be under budget by the 80,000 hours, but that also is a reflection of our deferral of this year's expansion. And a big chunk of that is also on the custom or handied out side, where we're seeing fewer passengers using the services. And it is hard to predict what people will do, especially on the Handy Dart side. So hopefully, for Handy Dart, the hours relate to the on-demand side of it. So more people demand it, the higher the hours will be. Any questions on operations side?
Susan, I just have one question about the fuel. That's great, the reduction in fuel costs because of the CNG. When we going forward, we now have CNG buses. So will our fuel costs in future budgets be less because of the CNG fleet?
Correct.
Okay, that's great.
And also, more stable and predictable because the rates are set typically for CNG as opposed to diesel prices.
The rates are set for how long? Like a period, like a 5-year period, or?
Oh no, it's shorter than that. But what I've seen in the past, it might be in 6 to 1 year increments. They'll tell you what the rates will be.
Great.
And they'll announce it, so you're just much more informed about the impact on the pricing on CNG. Unlike diesel, where every day it's a wild ride.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So going forward, so that'll be some savings anyway as we transition to more efficient fuels. Great. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
And also at our budgeting time, some more specificity on the numbers that Megan can feel confident in terms of budgeting for those fuel costs. Yeah. Any further comments on that form? No? Rashawn?
Sure, please. Slide 6. Yeah, not a lot to talk about here. We're slightly under on fleet maintenance and facility maintenance. We do have some vacancies, and there was lower overtime than anticipated. For vehicle maintenance, we are forecasting to be over budget, which is mostly related to work done related to COVID, vinyl panels, making sure the tape is on the bus, etc. I can't go on. I don't know all the items per se, but on the facility side, we did have a change. We had budgeted that the CNG fueling station was going to be an operational cost. And then towards the end of last year, we decided to capitalize it, which is saving us the operating dollars on the facility maintenance side.
Any comments?
Okay. Do you want to go to the next slide? Thank you. And again, on administration, we're basically on budget year to date and forecast to be slightly over budget by year end. There's some additional timing of hiring staff, and as well as some small related to COVID expenses, marketing campaigns, etc., that were unanticipated. Okay, on the lease fees, I think you probably remember we had a meeting with Roland, talked about some mitigating strategies to help out with the potential loss in passenger revenues, and one of those things was contemplating a lease fee holiday for all our transit systems. And so that has been finalized, and we are implementing a 6-month lease fee holiday on vehicle leases. And that is why you're seeing the forecast being under budget by $8.9 million. And that's 100% commission share. So that directly benefits the commission.
What's its implication on a go-forward basis?
Well, we will be reviewing next year's lease fee budgets, of course, and looking at any deferrals or long-term borrowing costs. It will not have to be paid back. It's maybe the holidays is not the right word, but it is this fiscal year's relief in total in that area. And then we'll be reviewing what the lease fees on our vehicles should be going forward, given all the contingency, deferrals, borrowing costs, expansion plans, etc. So you won't see that amount in your next year's budget to make up for it, if that's the question.
That's what I was wondering, whether
Yeah.
we want to be burdened next year with.
It's a gift. It's a true gift.
Good. Any questions, Commission? No?
It's Kevin here. I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome. We finally could do something. It was nice to put that in writing. And so the transit fund, which is basically what we have been talking about, or the impact to that all along. What you'll see is the commission share of the 39,619 at the top, which says that what we really need is to take $19.4 million out of the transit fund to make this all work, but we don't have $19.4 million in the transit fund. We have 17 million in the transit fund. And so there's a potential shortfall if everything in these slides come true of the 2.5 million, and we are not allowed to run a deficit. So we would have to make some harder decisions down the road if we thought that was going to come true. And just for your own information, I did add the other line reflecting that currently there's a policy that the commission likes to retain at 2.5% of their operating costs as a restricted balance, but I'm imagining that this would be an occasion where we would choose to use that. So,
do you anticipate by our September meeting that these numbers can be firmer and fold into our decision making?
I think the one piece that could change by September is understanding what the provincial or federal funding will be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Next slide.
Yeah, I don't have more to add unless others have questions on the performance and benchmarking or other general questions.
Any commission questions or comments? On behalf of the commission, Megan, thank you very much for all of your work and all the staff that you work with. We're very nervous, and I'm certain that everybody in your department feels the same way, so we can identify. With that,
still coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Commission members. I've appreciated all the things that have been delivered in today's meeting.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Fred. So I'll, on the question, which is to receive for information, those who are in opposition, please indicate. Hearing none, we'll take that motion as passed. Number 7, update, and Ryan, you're on deck.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I've got 2 quick updates for you for information today. Before I dive in, I just want to provide a quick verbal update on our electronic fare collection system project. As you'll remember, we are in the process of procuring new fare collection technology, and I just want to let everyone on the commission know that we are less than a week away from the bids closing, and we'll get to evaluating that those bids and that program over the coming months, with the idea of having something in place and a contract signed by the end of this fiscal year. So as we get further into the process, our updates will probably be limited just in the terms of keeping everything confidential, but want to let you know that that work is still ongoing. In terms of the first report I have for you here today, it is on our UPass programs in the Victoria Regional Transit System. With the changes to course delivery, there has understandably been an impact on our UPass programs. A large number of post-secondary courses have been moved online. And within our agreements with our UPass partners, one of the primary criteria is that students be on campus to be assessed the UPass fee. So we've been working with our UPass partners over the past couple of months and have a plan in place where every student who is attending an on-campus course will be assessed the mandatory UPass fee. And those students who are not attending an on-campus course but living in the region will have the ability to opt in or opt out based upon the specific conditions of each of the agreements, as they do differ. Along with this, we are going to be putting out a marketing campaign to encourage those students who haven't been automatically assessed the fee to access the program and to use transit. But we are expecting that the revenues to the commission will be down as a result of the fact that a large majority of students will not be taking those on-campus courses.
And this report is, we're receiving it for information. So to start the discussion, I'm going to put out that moved by HELP, seconded by Dubrow, that this be received for information. And before I go to the commission generally, I'm going to ask Quinn, do you have any questions or comments in particular on this report?
I don't think I've got any particular comments, but I would add we are rolling out various ways to get our members with U-Passes on campus in our opening week, and we've been planning dubiously to kind of roll that out efficiently.
Good. How do you think, I mean, to me, the resolution seems to have one that's practical and fair.
Yeah, I think the CCSS certainly shares that sentiment, that having the opt-in or out option for students who won't be in or won't be on campus is certainly fair, and kind of staying consistent with our kind of prior agreement where students who are on campus have that fee is fair.
Thank you. Commission, questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, staff, for finding a resolution to that important issue, because we need to not only have it solved for now, but because the U-Pass is such an important part of our program and the students are such important ridership, it's important that we maintain this very positive relationship. So I think you've done what needed to be done. So with no further comments, I'll call the question and ask if anybody's in opposition. Seeing none, we'll take that motion as passed. And Ryan, you've also got a report on the City of Victoria Youth Pass program update, and this is also for information.
Correct. Yes. Thank you, Chair. So this came at the request, I believe, of Mayor Orr at the February Commission meeting, just for a bit of an update on the City of Victoria's Youth Bus Pass program pilot. That pilot is ending at the end of this month, and we have been in conversations with staff at the City of Victoria on what a future program is going to look like. Due to my understanding, some of the impacts of COVID and decreased transit ridership, the city is moving away from the U-Pass model, where a cohort is assessed a fee for everyone within that group, and moving to a pay for purchase model, for lack of a better description, where it's a discounted pass, not necessarily to the same extent as the U-Pass program. But there is a 10% discount on the price of a monthly pass, and the city will pay that for each and every pass that's distributed. Just for reference, the kind of threshold or break-even point between the two programs is about 2,000 riders. So while it was feasible for the city prior to the pandemic, and they're seeing in about 2,300 rider range, making the U-Pass program more feasible, that did drop off in June, which led to the decision to move to the opt-in type model. But we will work with them and assess this moving forwards. There is still an intent, to my understanding, from the City of Victoria to continue with the U-Pass style program when appropriate. So when that time comes, we would be coming back to the Commission for approval on the model of that program.
Thank you. Under the circumstances, I'm still, because we're just receiving information, going to assume that to receive for information, moved by Helps, seconded by Dubrow. If there's any objection to that, please either commission member let me know. But if I don't hear otherwise, I'll assume that that motion is on the floor with those two commission members, and open it for discussion. And I don't know, Mayor Helps, if you wish to make any comments, or if you feel the report is self-explanatory.
Well, I feel like the report itself is fine, just for clarity, and I clarified this on the when the terrible headline came out. I was not calling transit ridiculous. I was calling ourselves ridiculous at the city, and I clarified that for Aaron and Susan Bryce. So that's a long time ago now, but Transit's been very supportive and helpful. I think we could have done a better job at the city in terms of noticing the trend earlier. But yeah, anyway, that's all I have to say. And I want to thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Director Orr?
Yes.
Just very quickly, simply a thank you for putting this together. It just helps, I think myself and probably some other directors just an understanding of where the situation was at. So thanks for that work that you've done to bring this forward.
Pleasure.
Further comments?
I have a Director Murdoch here. Just a quick question. I for my own edification, because I sometimes get people asking about options of buying. What is the threshold for bulk purchases? At what point does this option become available to, say, employers or other bodies that are interested, specific school districts, other things of that nature?
That's a great question. So through the chair, it's a minimum of 100 monthly passes is the threshold that's been previously approved.
Thank you very much.
Is that known in the school districts now? Is that
Pardon me, I didn't hear the first part of that question.
I was wondering that the question that the commission member asked, and you said the 100, is that understood in the various school districts?
Correct, yes. So when this program and these discounts all came about after the former Youth Pass program was ended in April 2016. So when that program ended, we did a lot of work with the school districts and presented them both with the UPass style program and then the bulk purchase style program, which is the one that the city is currently pursuing. So yes, the school districts are well aware of that, and it's available to any large employer, large institution, agency, that sort of thing, looking to bulk purchase passes for whether it be their students or constituents, that sort of thing.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? I'll call the question then. Those in opposition indicate. Hearing none, we'll assume that motion passes. Moving now in a positive way on a looking ahead, number 9, VRTC 10-year vision, and this is on the agenda for approval, and we'll get Levi to introduce the item, please.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Bryce. And thank you as well to the rest of the Commission for having me back today. Really looking forward to the discussion that will unfold around this particular document. So as the Commission, and as well, I want to thank the Commission for your feedback in our last meeting. We've made some pretty significant changes to this document based off your feedback. I think we have a much stronger plan based off that feedback. So thank you again. As a refresher and a reminder, the key purpose of this document is really to establish the vision for transit over the next 10 years in Victoria, and then as well to identify all of the plans, projects, and priorities that are going to be required to get us to that vision. In addition, and this is some feedback we received from the Commission historically, is this particular plan will bring all of those plans and projects across the whole system together into one document. So it really provides that roadmap for transit improvement, both for the Commission and as well for the general public. So this slide here just provides an overview of what the transit vision is. One key element I want to just elaborate on is that we do plan to update this document annually, so it will act as a living document. And so as we get new projects approved, that will continue to be incorporated into this document. We'll bring it back as every year, kind of at the August meeting is the current plan. Next slide there, Tina. Of course, given our current situation, we would be remiss not to include any content around COVID-19. So really just a high-level overview of some of the challenges and opportunities that this current scenario provides for us as an agency, and just acknowledging the situation we're currently in. Next slide, Tina. This slide is more for the public, really just providing an overview of the Commission and some of its key functions and goals. I'd really hope to have a group photo of the entire Commission, but apparently we don't have a photo of the whole Commission in its current state. So hopefully at some point in the future, when we're all able to assemble as a group again, we can maybe get that photo, and moving forward, we can have the full commission framed. So the vision statement for the Victoria Regional Transit System. This is the vision statement that was developed by the Commission through a series of various workshops over the last year. So this is slightly different than the vision statement that was determined in the Transit Future Plan, but it's really reflecting that the new vision that the Commission established together as a group. Understanding where we're going to see population and employment growth and density changes in the future is really critical to aligning our future transit investment. So this is something we wanted to make sure we incorporated in this document. We pulled this data from the CRD. So they had done some future planning work, and so we were able to leverage some of this information into this report. So what we're seeing, of course, is the highest proportion of growth is going to be occurring in the Westshore. So we're seeing some pretty high population and employment growth rates over the next 10 years. That being said, we're still going to see the majority of our population and employment still focused within the core region. So we're still going to be looking to provide high quality transit service in and around the core region. And then, of course, as well, seeing some minor growth in the peninsula as well. So this is just helping us to better triage where our transit investments are going to be required over the next 10 years. This slide here, I would say it's probably more helpful for the public and then also for new members of the Commission. Provides that Transit Future network that was identified in the Transit Future Plan. Once again, acknowledging where those rapid bus corridors are and where our key frequent transit network corridors are throughout the region as well. Similar to the previous slide, I think this is a really helpful slide for new members of the Commission or as well for the public, just providing an overview of the cost sharing model for the Victoria Regional Transit System, as well as some sort of key system overview metrics, including annual ridership, budgetary figures, cost recovery percentages, etc. A critical element for a strategic vision document is really incorporating some way of tracking progress towards the accomplishment of that vision. So I think this is the first stab within this document of incorporating that element. As you can see here, we've selected a number of key performance indicators that through our review of transit planning best practices feel are really helpful for helping us track progress towards the vision identified in this plan. That being said, I think we're going to be working collaboratively with the Commission in the coming months, probably through a future workshop, to really dive into this in a little more detail and actually set some targets. So of course, the Commission has instructed us to set specific mode share targets, but some of these other characteristics like service reliability, trip comfort, access to transit, and customer satisfaction, I believe requires just a little bit more discussion with the Commission. So you can expect that we'll be coming back to you in the future for a more holistic discussion around those components of this plan. And so moving on, this is really the center point of this new plan. So this is the 10-year Gantt chart that's showing all of the active and scheduled Victoria Regional Transit System projects and plans. And this spans across the entire organization. So we've got planning initiatives, infrastructure-related initiatives. We've got mobility innovation as well as safety-related initiatives. As well, on this particular slide, we're going to be tracking and incorporating the investment trajectory for the Victoria Regional Transit System. Of course, given our current scenario, there's still some significant uncertainty there, and we're looking forward to restarting that conversation with the Commission in the coming months as well. And once again, based off some of the feedback we received from the Commission last meeting, the one thing that was missing really was all the plans, projects, and priorities that weren't currently active or scheduled. So this slide here looks to identify all of those priorities that we don't currently know exactly when they're going to happen, but we do know that they are a priority. So what we've done here is we've tried to align them into two categories, short-term priorities and then medium to longer-term priorities. You'll see we've tried to align it on roughly the same timeline axis. So in terms of short-term priorities, UVic Exchange Phase 2, improvements to our operations and maintenance facilities, some park and rides, rapid bus enhancements, and then of course moving on to medium and longer term, we've got another broad list of different initiatives that as well you can all review at your leisure. Next slide, Gina. One of the last elements for this particular plan is just how are we going to be prioritizing our future investments in the Victoria Regional Transit System. We have a huge list of transit improvement priorities from all of our local area transit planning processes as well. Now with the rapid bus implementation strategy underway, there's going to be additional transit investment priorities that emerge through that process. So we evaluate this through what we call the transit evaluation process. We'll be looking to kick that off this year, starting at the end of August, early September, and we'll be looking to bring some of that information back to the Commission for the November meeting. And so essentially we'll be bringing back a draft of our annual service plan for the following year, and just an overview of how that TEPS process went to get us to the recommendations we bring forward. Next slide, please. And then the final slide for this vision is really just the process for implementing the vision. So, of course, we're going to continue to liaise very closely with our local government partners, First Nations, and the public, the general public as well. And then as well, it's just reiterating the purpose of the document. So it's that overarching framework for all the various plans for the Victoria Regional Transit System. As well, I think it provides that additional value of providing support to our other key stakeholders in the region for the development of their own plans and processes. So with that, I will turn the floor over to anyone who has questions.
Thank you for that. And this is a document which we are going to actually consider for approval, and to perhaps focus the discussion and comments. I'm going to once again call upon Hobson to grow, and so the motion is moved and seconded and open for any discussion or questions. And by the way, thank you for those members of the Commission who put out those good ideas at our last meeting, and as was pointed out by Lee, they ended up with a document that is better, and we appreciate that. Comments, questions from any Commission members?
Susan, it's Lisa. I've got a slew of questions and comments. If I maybe I'll run through them at rapid pace, not to take up too much time.
Don't worry about the time. Take what you need to, yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm just so delighted and thrilled to see this here. I think it's just a really, really great work that's done by staff with input from the Commission. So yeah, really thankful for that, and that we now have this as our document that says what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. I do have just a host of small suggestions, particularly since this is going to be a public-facing document. So, and they're just meant to help strengthen it rather than to be seen as a critique. There are 3 pictures in it, and the pictures tell 1,000 words, that have old infrastructure. So the right on the cover, the old blue bridge, it's supposed to be a visionary document. So if we could replace that with a picture of the new bridge or some other picture, it doesn't have to be the bridge. So too, throughout the document, there are 2 more pictures of bikes and buses on Wharf Street. And in one, it looks like a bus is about to run over a bike. Again, the new infrastructure on Wharf Street, the bike lanes, if you're going to feature Wharf Street, show the ease now for buses so they don't have to worry about bikes. So I would just say take out old pictures and put in new pictures. The COVID slide was fantastic. I thought that was really well worded about the strategies that we're helping to recover ridership. We need to be flexible, adaptable, and resilient. The old photo on the 4th slide I've already addressed. The CRD population and employment. I found this piece confusing, and I think it needs a little bit of refining, because it says CRD population employment by 2028 in the title, and then it talks about projections by 2038, and then it says what the population will be by 2028. So maybe that's a question. This is a 10-year vision.
I'll get a response to that right now, Lisa, and see what is that. The other things we'll assume going to be taking care of. Lisa Trotter's made notes here. But on that issue then, why don't you focus on that, Lisa, and then we'll get a response from Sam.
Sure. So this is a 10-year vision. So CRD population and employment, I guess, is the title, is the title meant to be 2038? And just maybe you could just explain that. And why don't we just go with 2030? Because it's our 10-year vision. So why don't we just talk about everything out to 2030?
That's a great question, Lisa. So through the chair, it was intended to be 2028. I am not sure how the 2038 slipped in there. So I'll take a look at that and make sure it's reflected. I think the reason why we're using 2028 is that the CRD already had all of these projections through a previous planning process they were doing up to 2028. So it's I guess the 9-year population and employment projection because we had that data readily available.
Right, but the CRD's projections are to 2038, not to 2028.
They also had they had it for a 10-year and a 20-year period, and so they were able to provide us with the 10-year estimate that they also had as part of the package that they received, is my understanding.
Okay,
they did have 2038 information as well, but they were able to provide us with specifically the projections for 2028 as well, which we used when developing this particular document.
Okay, that's perfect. Maybe there's just a way to do put a little bit of clarity into that second paragraph there, because it says 2019 to 2038 and then 2038 and then anyways, just for, again, because it's a public document. And then another, just again, small suggestion, thinking about reading this as a member of the public. Can we, that map is almost indiscernible on that page. So can it have its own standalone page so we can see it a bit better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great comment. We'll look at what our options are to improve the clarity of that information.
Perfect. And then so too with the next one, the Victoria Regional Transit System, the Transit Future Network, I even scrolled in and it got kind of blurry or not clearer. So that's like the most important information. If there's a way to make that, the map bigger and the kind of white space around it smaller. And again, I know I'm kind of being very detailed here, but this is our last chance to approve this. I think it's a great document and I really want it to be excellent. The next slide, it says business, when it talks about the business to residential property tax ratio, the little asterisk there, it says business to residential property tax ratio is 4.85 to 1. I'm just wondering how that number was derived.
That's a great question, Elisa. So through the chair, I don't know exactly where that came from. I pulled that information from our website. I don't know, Lisa, do you have any, or Megan, do you have any further thoughts or input on that particular indicator?
Hi, it's Megan. I think that needs to be updated. I think that might be an old number, so I think it's 5.5.
Lisa.
Yeah.
Good catch.
I would suggest just taking it out because it's not really relevant information, and each local government around the region has a different business to residential tax ratio. So even if it's an average or a median, I think it's kind of irrelevant information and just is not necessary. If someone strongly disagrees with it, then that's fine. Right, and then now the next slide, going back to this, this is our 10-year vision and the confusion around 2028 and 2038 and everything else. This slide has our 2039 mode share target. So I've just a question about shouldn't this just be out to 2030, our mode share targets? It's like another year that's being introduced into the conversation.
Levi?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we might have to take that one back and mull on that one a little bit, because I know through previous discussions with the commission, we had set sort of the target for up to 2039. So let's take that back and we'll brainstorm on that one a little bit and see if there's a way we can scale the difference over a 10-year period rather than having it all the way to 2039. So
I think that would be awesome. Yeah, because this is like the vision document is very clearly our next 10 years. And so I think this should be our 2030 mode share target. And, if it's less, obviously it's less, but just for consistency. Susan, sorry, I'm almost done.
These are excellent.
I know, but I don't want to take up so much time. And then the next one, the active and scheduled VRTS projects and plans. I was so excited to see this. I just do have a question again, why we're backdating to April 2019 or to 2019. Wouldn't we, since this is 2020 to 2030, wouldn't we just start it in 2020?
That's a great question. So again, through the chair, I think we wanted to be able to show some projects that had wrapped up sort of at the beginning of this year and show just a little bit of that historical piece as well.
Awesome.
That is a good point, though. I think because this document has been several months in the making, maybe, you know, it's spanned a period of time where maybe we could almost bump it to 2030, sorry. But I think we'll look probably to update that in the next iteration for the following August.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Actually, that's very defensible that we would show the work that's been accomplished in the previous year, and then each year we'll bump this a little bit further ahead. Yeah, I don't strongly object to it. I was just curious as to why. And again, a lot happened in 2019, so it's great to be able to show that progress. And then my two more, sorry, short-term priorities. Is it possible to break out medium and long-term priorities separately? Like so how we'd have short-term priorities, medium-term priorities, and longer-term priorities. For example, the third bus barn, as we call it in shorthand, is obviously a shorter-term priority than the fourth one. So have staff given, like, could these be broken out easily, and so we can see short, medium, and long-term to give some sense of cadence?
Yeah, it's a great comment. I know we had considered looking at separating those out. I think that some of the challenges arose around relative prioritization, particularly given our COVID scenario. So there's some questions around the investment trajectory. So I think that probably for next year, once we've revisited questions around reassessing our investment trajectory, we can start to put those into categories a little more clearly again. I just recall that there was a little uncertainty around some of those projects, given the fact that we need to reassess some of those considerations.
That's a great point. Maybe we just put a little star in that box that says, you know, due to COVID, basically what you just said as a star, so that the public can see that we are going to be doing a bit more refinement in terms of what's medium term and what's long term. And then the next slide, I was quite surprised because I thought we'd given direction from the commission to put GHG reduction potential as part of the evaluation process. So I was kind of looked at it, and then I looked at it again, and I don't see that. And I strongly feel, and I think the commission's given direction that GHG reduction potential should be a key part of evaluating new service or new routes. So if you could speak to that a little bit, and how do we get that added in?
Yeah, that's a great point, Mayor Helps. So through the chair, we will be reopening the TEPS process here coming very, very shortly. So thanks again for that comment. We will make that revision and add that into the document. And then as well, we'll be coming back to the commission in November with the result of that TEPS process. And I think that as well, you can expect to see that as one of the evaluation criteria as part of that process. And then as well, we're looking forward to getting further feedback from the commission at that point around if we interpreted that in the way that the commission would like to see. So I think it's going to be an ongoing process of incremental improvement, and that consistent two-way dialogue will only lead us in a positive direction. So thanks again for that feedback.
Okay, no problem. So, but today when we're approving it, we're going to be approving it with the, like, when you go away after this meeting, you're going to add another little hexagon that has GHG, or that, because I don't want to approve it without that in there.
So Levi, can we have confirmation that GHG will be identified in this document for this time period?
Certainly, yeah. Mayor Helps, if we acknowledge that in the text, let me just see here.
I think it needs its own hexagon, not to be picky, but all these other things are important, but so is GHG reduction. I know it's not going to look like such a nice flower, but you know, we'll have to live with that.
It'll be a little bit, we'll just tack one onto the side. It'll be a little, we'll see what we can do. We'll keep it aesthetic too.
Okay. That's perfect. And then the final one is just the last page is the bus looking like it's going to run over a bike. Again, an updated picture of the infrastructure with bikes and buses separate. If you want to use Wharf Street, that would be awesome. And Chair and colleagues, thanks for all that time. I think this is a fantastic document. And I just obviously went through it with a fine tooth comb and wanted to give staff that feedback. And thanks, Chair, for the time to do so.
Thank you for your diligence on that, Mayor Helps. And assuming, unless I hear otherwise, that
through the chair, this is Sharmarke.
right with you, Sharmarke, that the commission will assume that the comments that were made between Mayor Helps and Levi will, in fact, go ahead, and some of them change in this particular document, and then where it was indicated that it would be in a future document that would transpire. And I think it goes without saying, I think we've got support from around the table on that, Lisa. Yes, Sharmarke, go ahead.
Thanks to Lisa. Lisa raised some points that I wanted to raise. I really appreciate that. My quick question in terms of the projector and projecting workers through the region, what indication do you use? Do international students, immigration, and how do you define workers and the projector?
That's a great question. So through the chair, I don't have all the details about the inputs that went into that estimation methodology. What I do know is that it's what the CRD was using for all of their, I believe, their regional growth strategy and some of the work that they've been doing with some of their recent planning processes. So we could certainly look into that and get back to the commission, or alternatively, I know the CRD would have additional information on that one as well.
Yeah, I would really appreciate that. I'm not a CRD director, so unfortunately, I haven't read the report. So if any information regarding that, I would appreciate.
And could that information be sent out to Councillor Dubrow? And I think on a policy level, the more integration we can have with our data coinciding with CRD, the better it is, I guess, from a public understanding point of view. But what goes into forming those numbers, Sharmarke, you've got every right to know what that's compiled of. So we'll make sure you get that data.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And for us to use that data, what I understood is we're looking at what the trend of the transit rider will be. Is that correct?
Yes. So through the chair, I think one of the key elements from that particular projection information is just to, at a high level, to better understand where we're likely to see that growth across the region, and that helps us with prioritizing our future investment for the transit system. Just understanding where our future latent demand for transit is likely to be emerging. So yeah. I wouldn't say that we use that as a fine-tooth comb way of directing investment, but just as a way of shaping our understandings for the future about where we're going to see the majority of that growth in demand.
Yes, I think I'm happy to hear that we also look in other. I don't know, so I cannot speak. But what I know of is that most of the transit riders are working class people, construction workers, students, newly arrived immigrants. So it will be really nice to see the data. So I look forward as the staff sent to me and to the commission. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions from commission members?
Yeah, Director Orr here. Just want to add maybe a cautionary note there to Councillor Dubo. That data may not be as granular as you're looking for, so I just want to maybe mitigate your expectation a little bit there. That I think it is more of a high level shift or trending rather than a specific look at where the levels that you've mentioned. I think those sorts of numbers on an annual basis or on an observational basis could come from ridership figures, that if we even have those. So that's just my comment there, that Just be not expect too much from those numbers. Thanks.
I think if you are already on this CRD, then you would know the numbers. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was looking for, and that's where my indication was. If we are projecting what the trend of the transit rider would be, it is important what data we're using and what we are projecting on. Yes, that was exactly my point.
Thanks, Jeff. Further comments, questions? Yes.
It's Director Murdoch here. I just have a few things. One, I think just in response to the last couple of comments, if we're really seriously trying to get to a 20% ride share, we need to definitely be more than students and newly arrived immigrants and working class people. We need to be appealing to a really broad range of the community to reach those goals. So let's be realistic here. We have to make this appealing to a very wide range if we're going to reach those goals. My comments relate really to pages 8 through 12, and I'll go through them quickly. I just want to agree with Director Helps that just leave out the business to residential property tax ratio. It has zero value and would just be a flashpoint for people to complain about. The other piece was I agree that keeping the 2019 in terms of the active and scheduled projects and plans, because I think it's important to understand where we've come from, because sometimes these things always have a bit of a lag, and it's important to kind of reflect that as well, even though it is a forward-looking plan. I also feel very comfortable with the medium and longer term priorities being left together, because we do have the details in the Gantt chart, and I think one is a summary piece and one is a detailed piece, and I think those two together work pretty clearly to my mind. The additional piece I wanted to touch on was just in the key performance indicators, which relates on page 9, which relates to the transit evaluation process, in my mind at least. I think there's a couple of things that come to one. We touch on customer satisfaction in this sheet, to be determined. But if you're looking for a way to even out the hexagons from 6 to an even number, you might want to add that customer satisfaction as one of those evaluation process blocks in there as well, because I think it really is going to be a critical factor for us going forward. I think we identified trip comfort, access to transit. We haven't set the targets yet, but we've identified those as being key to us being successful. But that customer satisfaction is going to raise other issues that aren't captured within what we think they want, but are going to be wanted. And I think if we're being realistic here about our future, I think we really need to have that customer satisfaction feedback loop happening to kind of make sure we understand where we're not meeting the needs of non-transit riders in particular, about how we could actually start riding our services. And I think I flagged those targets in my document because they are really probably the key things for us to be measuring over time our success. There's the ride share, but there's also these other pieces that I think are pretty critical. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. I would just caution about, I think if we're going to take away in the mode share the targets, I think we have to be very careful not to lose that. We'd have to almost add another 10-year prediction in addition to the 20-year prediction, because there may well be a lag, right? We're going to be doing a lot of investment going forward over the next 5 years that might see very little change and then a big jump up as we get things brought online. And I wouldn't want those things to not necessarily linear. So I think we want to make sure we're keeping track of that big number no matter what. And I think that's it. I think I'm really impressed by the document overall. I do think, given the number of they're minor, a lot of them are visual questions and comments, but it might be worth us just deferring the actual approval of this until the September meeting, just because it'd be nice to have some of those things actually captured in the actual document. So that'd probably be my preference, that we defer this until the September, so we can actually see those changes in here before we approve it. But I also don't want to add a bunch of short-term work unnecessarily to staff that have a lot of other things going on what are really not critical aspects of this. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Kevin. I know that at this stage of the game, we were hoping to keep September meeting totally financially focused, but if it was a document that was coming back that was just basically being changed a bit and tidied up, I think we could easily have that on the agenda. I would think that there wouldn't be any objection to that. Other commission members, if you have any concern, I would be prepared to hear it now, but if not, the motion that's on the floor is to approve it. Kevin, do you want to make a motion to?
I'll make a motion to defer approval until the September meeting, just so we can have the changes to the graphics and other pieces finalized before approval.
I'll second that motion, Chair.
Thanks, Fred. I would motivate that just by saying, this can't be a public document until those changes are made anyway. So I think it probably makes sense for us to make sure that this is where we bring some value, is just some of that political lens, to make sure that we're not releasing it in a way that's going to cause confusion to the general public. And I think the points that have been raised so far have been excellent, and hopefully won't add a lot of work. Hopefully there's some more stock photos around you can pull from without having to go and do that. So thank you.
Levi, our request that these changes all be made and be at that September meeting, is that a timeline that you're prepared to stand behind?
That sounds very reasonable from my perspective. One last comment I might make through the chair, just based off of some of the diversity of feedback. So Mayor Helps, I'm wondering, for the mode share target, are you comfortable if we retain that in its current state for this year's document? In the sense that we've already had a pretty comprehensive discussion with the commission about that, but then next year when we're reviewing the KPI information, then we revisit that in a more holistic way, just to kind of speak to Director Murdoch's comments about how, the rate of increase in mode share may not be sort of a 1-to-1 ratio as time progresses.
Yeah, I think what Director Murdoch said makes a heck of a lot of sense. I didn't have my video on, but I was nodding while he was talking. Sure, that's fine. It just seems rather random that it's a 2039 mode share target in a 10-year vision. So, like, it just doesn't make sense to me. All of a sudden, 2039 is there out of nowhere. And earlier we've been talking about 2028 and 2038, and now we're talking about 2039. So, yeah, I don't know exactly what to do about that, but I just think, yeah.
Maybe you can clarify that it's that was in the transit, the timeline in the transit future plan, in a sense, and that it as a bullet or a subnote for now, and then we can have that broader discussion about revising it with more sort of comprehensive discussion.
Well, is there a way for you folks to come back in September and give us your best guess at what we should be aiming for 2030? Because we're not approving this today, so we can then confirm the 2030 mode share targets in September. Given your best guess about what these should be for 2030. So to put a little bit more kind of thinking around it, rather than since it's the first. Yeah, I would prefer to have 2030 targets before approving it. If the rest of the commission disagrees, that's fine. But I agree with Director Murdoch. By 2039, we will see that kind of almost exponential, or last 5 years. But I think in the 10-year vision, we need a 10-year target. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
Levi, you're nodding, but I need to hear you say that is doable for that meeting.
Yeah, certainly. So through the chair, we'll do our best estimate of what a reasonable target would be for half that time period, and bring that back to the commission for review and endorsement.
That's great. Thanks, and thanks for checking. Thank you, Chair.
Any further discussion on the motion to defer?
Yeah, Director Orr.
Yes.
Yeah, just I'll support the motion to. I could have gone either way. Excuse me on that, but I'm happy. It sounds like there's some support for that further review. And just to add a comment that relates to directly what was just said, I think that the language perhaps could be along the lines of we have different timelines of various projections, but that the 10-year plan is informed by those longer term visions, which aren't necessarily consistent in timing, but our best estimate or our learned expertise leads us to believe that the KPIs for our 10-year vision are X or Y or Z, and then we're just recognizing that there are different timelines. But I do agree with the position that if this is a 10-year vision, let's let's, where possible, put our 10-year revision in there, a number in there, and then we can reflect on whether that's a non-linear or whatnot and say that we don't expect it to be half of that at that point. So without adding a lot of work, I think that's the general sentiment that I could support, and that allows us to acknowledge that we're trying to pull in some different timeframes here, but we're really focused in this document on what does it look like at the end of 10 years.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to defer? I'll call the question, and those in opposition indicate. Seeing no opposition, that motion passes. Number 10, infrastructure update, and we have the other Levi. And this will be for information.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, today's presentation, again, we're going to follow a similar format. We're going to discuss our active projects and then go into our planning project. So first and foremost is our bus shelter program. We have received 29 applications for shelters across the region. We've currently approved 8 of them. And the reason why the remainder have not yet been approved is we have a funding application into federal government via the province to get multi-year ISIP funding to offset the costs to our local partners. So that will reduce the cost of the shelter to 20%. So we felt it prudent to not approve those right now until we get confirmation that we're going to get that federal funding. And last update is we're expecting an approval in the next month or so. So that's where we're at with that program. Any questions?
No? Go ahead.
Okay. Next one is the CNG facility component for our CNG fleet. At the last update, just to recap, we had already commissioned the fueling station, so that's why we have vehicles in operation. We also did a small modification to our wash bay to allow some vehicle maintenance to occur, to buy us time while we can do the facility maintenance upgrades to the maintenance garage out in Langford. And so what we needed to do there is still allow vehicle maintenance to occur while doing the upgrades in the shop itself. And so what that meant is it took a longer sort of window to do those works. We're just concluding that work now, and our contractor's demobilizing. And we'll just be doing final testing and commissioning of the facility, and then that project should be wrapped up for September. So that's our plan on that. Moving over to our Handy Dirt facility, things have been fairly quiet on the public front on this one currently. We're into our detailed design. We have a pretty good established local community neighborhood working group established. Lots of good engagement there. We're working with them through the various concerns that they have. I think it's been working quite well, actually. We also did a public survey to sort of do a broad net on getting input from folks across the region. And we just published a what we heard document to sort of communicate out what exactly the comments were with respect to that project. So that's out in the public realm as well. And we're just currently working with our utility companies. If you've been to the site, you know there is the hydro transmission towers there. And so we're working with Hydro. We just put an application in to look at what is the best layout for the project site to also integrate with the tower. So we've got, height issues. Do we raise the tower? Can we have vehicles in and around the tower itself? So we're working through all of those issues. Once we get through that, that will then better inform the detailed design. And then we'll be able to move more forward into the project for a sort of late calendar year is sort of our best case, getting in the ground with actual physical works. Jumping a little bit down the road to the Island Highway priority work, literally up the street. We're about 90% complete on the detailed design work. And we're just finalizing discussions with our local partners, both with Town of View Royal and City of Colwood. And once we get that, our intent is to come to the commission in November with an overview of that work. So a little bit more of a deep dive into the actual scope that we're proposing to move into project. And we'll also identify some of the budgetary costs associated to those improvements. And our desire would be to seek commission approval later this year. And we're also going to make sure that Megan is well armed with the information for budget building purpose as well. And then UVic, they've been really keen. They've been a really good partner, I think, on this one. So this is the second phase of the large transit exchange kind of by the UVic bookstore in the sub building. So we had completed the southern half about 5 years ago, and this is to complete the other portion. And so we're just finalizing a project term sheet, which would then be a precursor to us to complete a business case, present something to the commission for your approval, and then submitting a budget request to the province and a ISIP funding approval as well. And so what we have with this one is UVic's prepared to provide the property to the project, and as well as provide a small funding contribution towards the project as well. So that will, I think, go well to, again, offset some of the local costs. Our facility master planning document, just to recap, the intent behind this one was, first and foremost, was to provide a 25-year vision that supports the anticipated growth to the region and what are the necessary facilities to support that. And then the second component was really targeting our immediate needs. So pre-COVID, remember, we were quite keen on adding additional vehicles. We were starting to hit a capacity constraint. So we were looking at both of how can we increase capacity at our sites, both at Langford and Victoria. And then an additional item is what additional things do we need to do to modernize those facilities to kind of bring them up to a current standard so that we can provide a more efficient transit service. In addition to that, with the onset of the battery electric program, we're also integrating that into both the short-term work as well as the long-term work for the facilities. So dovetailed along with that is we get into that a little bit, planning a little bit later, so I'll kind of defer some comments to that. So what I'm saying with this is we're trying to integrate both the immediate needs for operations, providing some relief so we can do some modest expansion to buy us some time should we move forward with expansion in the next short few years, as well as creating some room so that we can actually construct a new facility while not impacting service expansion should we want to do that. So that's where we're at with that. The next piece is our Westshore Transit Priority Action Plan. And this is kind of like a continuation of the ongoing design work that we've been doing through that Western corridor. And this is focusing in on the more western portions of Colwood and moving into the Langford areas. And so you're seeing some low-hanging fruit here is probably going to be on Goldstream Avenue. Our intent here, as well as at the November meeting, we will present some of the recommended concepts that have come out of that work in consultation with both Colwood and Langford. And we'll have a good discussion on that, and we'll see what our next steps are with respect to some of those projects. Langford has already stepped forward and said that they're prepared to work with us on a couple of improvements in their corridor already. So we may be able to actually advance some of the Langford improvements quicker than we would have actually expected. So that's another positive. Battery electric bus. This has been, I think, fairly quiet at the commission front, simply because we are putting a lot of effort into ensuring that our tender documents are robust. We want to create a tender that gives BC Transit the flexibility to onboard additional systems, not just in Victoria, to make sure that we're getting the right proponent, so we're getting the right technology, the right team. And so we've also solicited outside legal support procurement office that specializes in sort of special procurement. And so what I've been told by the team that's responsible for this is that they are targeting for an end of summer issuing of that NFRP, which would then be the sort of the stepping stone to get that first 10 battery electric bus fleet here in Victoria. And then concurrently, we're also working with BC Hydro, because obviously power distribution is required at any site where we have a large number of battery electric vehicles coming in. So I've been working with them, and they've been, I'd say, a great partner thus far as well. So that's where we're at on the battery electric front. Dovetailed into that too, not in the Handy Dart project report, but we are also looking at potential opportunities for increasing the number of battery electric vehicles in the short term. So even if day one we have a small number of battery electric vehicles deployed at Handy Dart, we're looking at possibly increasing the amount of charging stations, say, at that location. So if the opportunity presented itself, we could actually deploy a larger number of battery electric vehicles at that location. So we're making sure that we are not precluding that from happening through both the design and the construction activities. So I would say over the next year or so, we'll probably have a bit more interaction with the commission on that discussion item, because there is I think a pretty good opportunity for us to kind of leverage that with some of the federal programs that are yet to be kind of like fully fleshed out, but we're kind of crystal balling it, and we believe there's really good opportunity there as well. Jumping over to the Ministry of Transportation, what we're able to communicate are some of the active projects that are known. I think they're known in the public realm, but maybe not to the full extent. Obviously, Mackenzie Interchange has got transporting measures through the design. They've incorporated our large transit shelter type, so we've got good services that are provided through the interchange concept itself. Out in Highway 14 towards Souk, they're moving forward with their park and ride construction and some of the highway realignment that's happening out there. So that project's underway as well. And then a couple of studies that you may or may not be aware of is they are looking at continuing off of the Mackenzie Interchange bus priority measures further out to the west. So that would be, we'll call it the Thetis Lake, or if you will call it interchange there. And then also transit priority measures on Highway 17. There's the Keating Interchange project, which then would also start to drive some of the transit related aspects into that sort of multimodal approach with respect to that project. So we do expect to have some continuing conversations with them, providing input through that project, so that we've got the transit facilities necessary to support that portion of the corridor of Highway 17. In addition to this, through the chair, Mayor Helps made a comment about GHG. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of pieces that we're working on, kind of more BC Transit corporate, that are kind of aligning with that. So one of the things that the infrastructure team's been doing is we're putting together a capital project prioritization framework. And we're going to be bringing that forward to our internal capital program board for endorsement. We've consulted with the Ministry of Transportation. And what this document will do is it looks at a host of factors, including sustainability and climate, evaluating all of our capital projects to help A, bolster business cases, B, be able to provide information to communicate the value of said projects, and as well as to meet any sort of audit that we might face in the future to ensure that we are making investments in a wise manner. And also to, I think what it will also do is support our applications to the federal government as part of those packages. So we're quite excited about this document. It's simply a multiple count evaluation, but what it will do is if we have a different weighting of priorities over time, we can adjust the prioritization based on projects, based on different, say, policy levers. So that's a really unique thing about this. So we can kind of put it into a model and say, okay, well, if environment is the most important thing or ridership's the most important thing, you could end up looking if that changes your priority in terms of project investments. And we can do some of that sensitivity analysis moving forward. So I'm excited about that. Just maybe I'm a bit of a planning geek, but I do quite like that because it provides really good information depending on the question asked. And then I also think too, for a lot of our local partners is maybe not so much in the Greater Victoria region because we have the commission, but in a lot of our communities, we need to inform municipal staff as they report up to councils on various projects as to the merits and benefits of projects. And this will be a really good tool to provide that information in those communities that do require that additional level of information to garner this necessary support. So those are a couple of other interesting things that we're working on behind the scenes. There's my report.
Thanks, Levi, for the infrastructure update. Lots of things on the go. This will be received for information. I'm going to take that helps, and DeBow have moved and seconded. Now, questions and comments on Levi's report. Any members of the commission? You were obviously very thorough, Levi. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Susan, I've got just a couple of quick questions. Is that okay to go ahead?
Absolutely.
So the operations and maintenance facilities plan, it's totally awesome that the phase 1 is going to be completed in October. Will that be presented to the commission for information at our November meeting?
I can most certainly do that. You know, I actually hadn't contemplated it because it's pretty tactile, but I do, you know, having heard that, I actually think there would be some good value in that, because I do think there would be some potential for some small capital project improvements that the commission would want to speak into. So most certainly we can do that in November. Great idea.
That's great. And then that's great to see that the whole study is going to be completed in January 2021. And so too, an update to the commission after that, I think would be excellent and most welcome. My second question is with the planning studies, Highway 1 bus priority planning, the comment that this work includes exploring transit priority treatments that align with BC transit priorities. So can you say a little bit more about what MOTI is planning next on Highway 1 and what this work entails?
It's one of those ones where we've been providing input, and it's kind of been through the South Island Transportation plan that they're going to be unveiling in the fall. So it would be a little bit premature because that's not a public document yet, and I'm not yet certain as to the finalization of the actual document itself. But what we have in terms of our priority plans is we've always talked about improvements both southbound and northbound from where the Bureau Colwood interfaces with Highway 1, and looking at treatments on the shoulder on both sides of the highway. So basically taking what has been done thus far and making that full corridor look like a full bus lane corridor. So I don't know what the outcomes of that are going to look like, but we confirmed some of this wording with our ministry colleagues. So I think they're a little bit strategic in that we're in alignment. And I think what that means is that we're looking at a contiguous corridor for bus and shoulder lanes.
Okay, that's amazing. That's what I hoped the answer would be. It was a little bit kind of vaguely worded, but I guess we'll wait for the province to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only kind of like, you know, I'm hypothesizing on that, but when they gave us that wording, you kind of like take a couple steps forward and say, okay, it probably is going to look like that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. That was my hope as well. We'll wait for the study.
Yeah, exactly. We'll wait.
Great. Thanks, Levi, and thank you, Chair.
Further comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question and ask for those in opposition to indicate. Hearing no opposition, we'll take the motion as passed. Takes us to our final item on this agenda, the planning update, and Seth, please.
Thank you, Chair Bryce. I'll just run through a few elements of this planning update and welcome any questions from the Commission. There is an attached COVID ridership analysis that I can speak to what we've seen through COVID on the impact on our ridership on our buses. Starting off, we have fall 2020 service change. We have a slight reduction of service hours from what you approved previously due to COVID. We've done a lot of analysis and looked at what we've seen through COVID and moved that forward, projected that, reduced ridership on route or reduced service levels on routes that go to University of Victoria and Coastal College campus, especially because they won't be doing very many in-person classes. They'll be doing mostly online this fall. We've reintroduced late night service, not completely, but most of late night service till 2 a.m. in the morning on Friday and Saturday nights. We've also made some tweaks here and there to maintain coverage across the system and ensure that we have capacity where we are seeing high ridership, but reflected throughout the day to better reflect different ridership trends that we're seeing as part of COVID that I'll get into in the COVID analysis. For our local area transit plans, we were hoping to present them to the Commission today, but we scheduled some meetings with respective councils for Esquimalt, View Royal, and the Saanich Active Transportation Advisory Commission or Committee, and have those coming up in the next few weeks. So wanted to give your municipal councils the opportunity to review those ideas contained in those plans before we bring them to the Commission for adoption. We'll be going through that process and then bringing them back to the Commission for adoption of those local area transit plans in November. We continue to work on the rapid bus implementation strategy, and we're currently meeting with local governments across the region. We've met with a few in the last month, and we'll be meeting with the remainder in the next month ahead, and working towards presenting this to the Commission in November for adoption. To turn your attention to the COVID ridership performance report, instead of providing sort of our standard route by route level performance report that we provide, this time we provided a bit more of a COVID picture. And so the first figure in the attached report, if you don't mind scrolling down a bit more. Yeah. Provides a chart that we as staff see on an almost daily basis, which is that in mid-March, we saw a precipitous drop in our ridership of nearly 78%, but we've seen a steady increase compared to 2020 ridership in the blue line. The green line, or sorry, the blue line is 2019 ridership and the green line is 2020 ridership. And so we're just inching our way up over the last few months on a steady, even keel. We've plateaued for the last few weeks around the mid-50s, but we're hopeful that we'll continue to see some improvement in ridership as we move forward. You'll note that that at the bottom I've added the months in addition to the weeks of the year, and the winter service period where mostly unaffected by COVID. The spring service period, which was where we typically drop the post-secondary service levels a little bit. And this year we carried that out a little bit early and then moved forward with our summer service change a little bit in advance of where we normally do, because there was no schools in session. So there were little drops where you see those lines, but they didn't have a significant impact on ridership. Moving to the next charts that speak to ridership across the region, we see these are total numbers for average daily ridership volumes, blue being 2019 numbers, green being 2020 numbers, what we're seeing this year. So we've seen in that short spring period, we saw a 74% decline in the core, a 76% decline on the peninsula, and a 71% decline on in the Westshore. Looking at the summer, we see those numbers improving marginally. And I think that you can see that the peninsula has a greatest decline, and a good part of that is because fewer people are traveling to the ferry to go to other regions, doing less inter-regional travel, but overall, we're seeing improvement in growth in the system. Moving on to the next image, it's spring ridership by route type. And so from a planning perspective, we're looking at where we've seen the greatest impacts, where should we be reducing service the most, where should we be looking at it. And when we see the spring ridership, we saw ridership levels drop very consistently, just remarkably consistently across the route type. And so that was a bit of a surprise. The one exception, of course, being the targeted routes, which are routes that are targeted heavily to post-secondary and office commute, sort of typically a few times a day or a few times a week even, and a few K-12 school trip routes. Looking forward at the summer, we've seen a shift in up, so it's not such a rapid decline over last year, and we're seeing that ridership grow, most significantly on our frequent transit routes. So we're doing pretty well. We have about 41% of last year's ridership on an average weekday in the summer period. So we're confident that we'll continue to see that ridership grow, and we're happy that ridership volume is returning to some of our best routes. That concludes the planning update, and I'd be happy to receive any questions through the chair.
Thank you for that, Seth. And this commission is for information. And so to put it on the floor, I'm going to suggest that we have moved by Helps and seconded by DeVoe. And the motion is now up for debate and discussion. So, commission members. This is pretty much, I guess, what we kind of expected here, Seth. when are you expecting, are you looking to post Labor Day to see some adjustments, or without the universities and colleges back in, are you thinking maybe September might be more like August than usual?
I think that we'll see some recovery in September. The crystal ball that we wish we had that we don't really have is we know to a certain degree what's happening with, we know the most about post-secondaries because they've had to plan this. We don't really know what's going on with K-12 schools. We've had lots of conversations with school superintendents and some principals about what they're planning, and they're basically have been doing scenario planning to be prepared for any shift in what happens with the pandemic to be able to respond effectively. So we've done some of that scenario planning on our end as well to be able to shift, to be able to adjust on an as needed basis. But we are expecting to see some increase in September as long as the current positive trend stays. And I think with the pandemic, we've seen this just coming out of last few days, we've seen some negative numbers. So there's maybe a bit of tentativeness, but if people do start returning to the office, then we'll have service ready and available for people to maintain that distancing, and the mandatory mask rule will support people being comfortable and safe taking that transit moving forward. But we're fairly optimistic for September, but ready for any eventuality.
I would think this chart, along with hopefully positive adjustments because of the mask wearing, hopefully with some more updated information on financials, will kind of form the basis of discussion for this commission in September to make any decisions that would need to be made in order to stay financially viable.
Absolutely.
Any comments or questions from commission members? I will then call the question, and those in opposition, please indicate. Hearing none, I'll assume the motion is passed. And the next meeting is scheduled for November the 3rd, we say, but actually our next meeting is scheduled for September. You've all got that in your calendars. I hope that'll be an important meeting. And with that, have last enjoyable bits of summer before we meet again, commission members, and I'll take a motion to adjourn. Thank you to all staff. Should I take it? I'll take it. Help Sundabo. You've been so consistent throughout this meeting. I'm going to take it that you're moving and seconding the motion to adjourn as well. And I'll ask for those in opposition. Hearing none, motion is passed and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
See you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks everyone for your time.